So welcome back to another Exponential Race to the Top session. This one is on accelerating and funding the energy and materials transformation through the value chain. So some words and terms there that will be familiar to you from the session that we heard before with Johan Falk. It's all about money, of course, at this UN climate meeting here in Bonn, and also at the next big UN climate meeting at the COP that will be happening later in November this year in Baku in Azerbaijan. Countries are negotiating a number. How much money can they commit to mobilizing, to supporting developing countries in adapting to the impacts of climate change and making the transition to renewable energies? Whatever the number is that they'll at the end agree to, it is clear that new and innovative sources of finance will be needed outside the process, as the Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC Secretariat reminded us the other day. This session will showcase how companies are accelerating and funding the renewable energy and the materials transformation through their value chains. And with this, I'd like to welcome Sriram Rajagopal of Inter IKEA Group, who will be joining me here on the stage. We have coming up Thi Bach Tuyet, Woodsland Furniture, that's a supplier to IKEA. We have Johan Mandaric Reunanen of H2 Green Steel and Fredrik Nilzén of Scania, who are comfortably seated at our studio in Stockholm, I see. And are hopefully hearing me as well. You are hearing us, that's great. We need to bring up on Zoom Thi Bach Tuyet joining us from Vietnam. And here we have Sriram Rajagopal. Welcome to another session, another Exponential Race to the Top session, Sriram. Let me just check briefly whether we have our guest from Vietnam with us on Zoom. No.
Yes.
Yes. Terrific. Now magic does happen. Sriram, let me put my first question to you. What are you at IKEA doing to transform energy and materials and the value chain more widely?
Sure. Thank you so much for having us here. Just to start by setting a context, IKEA is committed to halving emissions by FY30 compared to FY16 baseline, and then getting to net zero by FY50. Materials and energy as such, materials, food, ingredients, and energy, they constitute around 67% of our overall footprint. So when I talk about energy, it's both production plus transportation, and then materials and food ingredients, roughly about 50%. So if I just start off moving towards 100% renewable energy is a key enabler to us getting to our net zero goals. So if I start off with production, which is 10% of our footprint, we are around 60% of the energy is consumed as heat, and we are really working with suppliers to phase out fossil fuels as such. We are moving towards complete electrification of production processes. We have set short-term goals. By FY25, we would have already phased out the use of coal on site and also the use of fossil fuels, oil-based fossil fuels on site. And then we have an ambition to phase out natural gas completely by FY30. So we have an ambition on the production side to reduce our emissions by 80% by FY30 compared to our baseline year FY16. We are at 32% reduction now, so there is a job to do in the next 5 years from now. And then on the material side of things, which is the biggest part of our footprint, we have set a goal of halving emissions by FY30, and we are at 7% emission reduction now. And we are working on various initiatives, moving towards using materials with lower footprint, moving towards more plant-based food when it comes to food ingredients, but also aiming to use only recycled or renewable materials by 2030. So these are some of the main movements that we are really on to transform materials, food ingredients, and then the whole energy systems as such.
And you mentioned a big part of that work goes on in the supply chain, right? And,
Yes.
and we're very happy to have one of your suppliers here today, and that's Woodsland Furniture, represented by Thi Bach Tuyet. I'm pronouncing that halfway right. So Tuyet, your company, Woodsland, you make wood products including for IKEA, so there's a shared interest in bringing down the carbon footprint. through, of course, introducing renewable electricity. Can you tell us how you've been succeeding with that?
Yeah, so, hi everyone. Thank you for taking us here to have chance to speak out in this event. And Woodsland is a private stock company in Vietnam, and we have been an IKEA supplier for about 20 years. Supplying the wooden furnitures, which made from local plantation wood. And as you might already know, that IKEA has been continuously taking many actions in their business agenda to reduce its climate footprint. And Woodsland, as one of IKEA suppliers who participate in this global supply chain, we also have our commitment and action to minimize the negative impact of to the environment from our activity by using the renewable energy electric for our production. And for us to produce a furniture product, the electric cost takes about 2 to 3% of the total cost of the product. So it is very important. And to transfer to the energy renewable energy source, Woodsland has made some investment by invest into the solar panels in the rooftop of our buildings, factory buildings. And I can say that for IKEA production today, we are using 100% of the renewable electricity, which is 70% of that come from the solar rooftop, and 30% come from through the buying the IREC. Buying IREC is just a temporary solution for now, and we will explore the opportunity in the future to move up to the renewable electricity staircase. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll hear more about the investment behind that a little bit later in this program. I'd now like to turn to Fredrik to find out what Scania is doing to transform materials and energy.
Thanks a lot, Andrea. Great to be here. Thanks for being a part of this panel. I think the starting point needs to come from also what Scania is, a heavy vehicle manufacturer for many years. Obviously, take a lot of pride in making sure that the engines are as efficient as they can. But also looking into our decarbonization journey, we put out a stake towards 2025 already to make sure that we drive down our emissions in our operations, but also in the use phase. And concluding that in terms of emissions, we have 96% of the total emissions in the tailpipe perspective when our customers use our vehicles. So in that sense, it's a huge task to shift the sales to electrification. And we target to have 50% of our sales already in 2030 in Europe towards electrification. But with that said, shifting from combustion engine over to electrification, we also see that there is a shift of where the emissions come from. And with that said, we have our hotspot materials. And the hotspot materials are for sure steel, cast iron, aluminum, and batteries. And they, in fact, constitute of almost 80% of the total emissions then from that manufacturing process. So those are important. And since a couple of years back, we have also looked into how in the world can we decarbonize these materials. Also acknowledging the fact that fossil-free steel, for example, is not available in the market. There were limited demand, but also very limited supply. And therefore, one of our strategies has been to also sign offtake agreements with partners that are keen to make that supply happen. So I think that's one thing to conclude here. And over to you, Johan, then later on that. Second thing around energy, I think what we have done over the last years is to really make sure that whatever we produce, it needs to come from green electricity and making sure that that's almost the easy thing. It's not easy, but it's almost the easy thing. But the energy that goes into our production and the overall operations of the company need to get down. And we're on 43% now towards our target on 50% for 2025. But it doesn't stop there, right? Every 10th year, we need to halve the emissions in order to follow the carbon law. So that will, the direction is clear, I would say, but also concluding that we cannot do this alone. We want to drive the shift towards a sustainable transport system, but we cannot do it alone. We need to advocate across the ecosystem.
Thanks, Fredrik, and you made that transition there almost to Johan, who is sitting next to you from H2 Green Steel, a company that set out to produce green steel with a carbon footprint 95% lower than the steel that we have today. Johan, can you tell us a bit more about how the product that you'll be producing is transformative?
Sure, thank you, Fredrik, and thank you for inviting me and us to be here. I mean, indeed, we are one of those partners that are keen to make this happen. Just a bit of background. So our purpose at H2 Green Steel is to decarbonize hard-to-abate industries, and we start with steel. And the reason being that steel is one of the dirtiest industries out there. It accounts for roughly 7 to 8% of the global emissions. Mainly coming from the step before the steel production, which is actually the iron. And now, so we have a lot of circularity. We use a lot of the scrap that is available, but that's not enough to cover the immense need for steel in the market. So roughly every year, 1,900 million tons of steel is produced, and there's only roughly 700 million tons of scrap. So we lack 2/3 of the scrap, right? So we need to focus our attention on the iron making step, which is the vast majority of the CO2 emissions in the entire steel value chain. And we do by looking at how can we produce iron by using green hydrogen instead of using coal and coks that is traditionally used. And then how can we use electricity in creating the steel, which is what really abates those 95% that you mentioned, Andrea. And now, with this, we need a lot of renewable electricity. So the first plant that we're building is up in Boden in Sweden, which will at full capacity produce 5 million tons each year. And this is really part of creating a new industry logic. So before the iron making plants and the steel plants, they were close to where you could get easy access to coal, where you could get easy access to coks. But now we need to establish these sites where we have access to green electricity, right? So we get a new logic of global ecosystems and value chains for these materials.
Thanks, Johan, for explaining how that works and what the thinking and doing there is behind H2 Green Steel. Now, this company, H2 Green Steel, it started, let's say, pretty much with, I don't know, a website, a vision, not much more, certainly not any cash in the bank. It was completely new, yet you managed to pull in considerable amounts of funding to set up this completely new production site with a new way of producing steel. And I'd like to know, since you're also seated next to a truck company, essentially, or a representative of a truck company, what role did other companies in the value chain play in making this happen, making this finance happen?
Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, I mean, I usually tell people who are curious about H2 Green Steel. So roughly 3 years ago, there was 5 people and a PowerPoint. So how could we get access to the finance needed to build the world's largest hydrogen plant, a DRI tower which produces the iron, and a steel plant at somewhere around 6.5 billion euros. well, I mean, we have no balance sheet, we have no cash flow, there is nothing really. So what we had to do was to project finance this whole project, and that cannot be done without any collateral. Investors would not have invested money in us. The banks and other creditors would not have loaned us the money. So what we needed was the customer offtake. And having bold companies, companies that really do take the climate crisis for real, that take it seriously, and that, for example, commit to Science-Based Targets Initiative, that set really ambitious climate targets for themselves, and want to decarbonize their value chains. And as Fredrik mentioned, once the shift from the combustion engine to electric vehicles is done, then looking at the hotspot materials, and steel being one of them. And for us, that was a great match, being able to get these long offtake agreements, 7 to 8, 9 years. And with that, we could unlock the funding that was needed. That is one of the key essential pieces of the puzzle.
And of course, Scania, with Fredrik sitting next to you, is one of these off-takers. And I'd be interested to hear a bit about the business case, essentially. So green steel is going to be more expensive. It is more expensive than the conventional steel. So what makes you want to have it? And also, if your electric trucks then, with more costly green steel in it, are more expensive for your customers, what makes you confident that they will buy those more expensive trucks?
It's a great question. But I would say the starting point for us is that we're confident that we're doing this change as a global community. There is no doubt. And with that said, we believe that there will be a time, especially here in Europe to begin with, but we also see that in other markets. We don't want to be there in a couple of years where we pay just as much for conventional steel, together with taxes and CBAM mechanisms, as we were about to pay for fossil-free steel. I think that would be a waste for many reasons. So the business case, I would say, is a combination of de-risking our future, but it's also a matter of knowing that we're building this society. So we're building our business for tomorrow. And then you could argue that it's really, really hard to tell when there's cost parity, right? Between conventional and fossil-free steel. We don't know either. Will it be 30, 32, 34, 36? We don't know. But we're confident that there will be a lot of other companies out there that will also need to, but also want to, make sure that they decarbonize their value chains. And then we will all hunt for that material that is being produced in that new way. And sitting there will be a lot more risky if you don't have anything in your books. So I think that's for sure a big part of the business case. And then maybe the remaining question being, will the customers be ready to pay extra for a truck that is made by this steel? That we don't know either. But we do know that there are transport buyers around the globe that are also committed to this transition, to their decarbonization targets. So this ecosystem that I talked about before, we know that they file already today requirements on how goods are being transported. And that concludes that the carriers out there, they will also need to deliver fossil-free transport services. And we believe that it's not only tailpipe emissions that will be included tomorrow there, but also, in fact, what goes in the vehicles that are being produced. So there's a strong business case, but for sure, the incentives in the ecosystems for taking these steps, we believe can be far, far stronger tomorrow than they are today.
Thanks, Fredrik. We've covered this aspect of accelerating the energy and materials transformation through the value chain a little bit. Let's go into the funding, the financing part of it. At IKEA, Sriram, you have a program, financial program to support suppliers and switching to renewable electricity. How does that work?
So IKEA works with a whole type of different suppliers around the world. Some are as big as IKEA or even bigger than IKEA. Some suppliers are typically small and mid-sized companies. We did a survey around 5 years ago with our suppliers, and we found out that typically with the small and mid-sized company, it was not lack of intent to accelerate the renewable energy journey, but it was also financing, which was a barrier because many of these companies already had loans for various capital goods, including building, machinery, and all. And then it was it was difficult to gain access to a big corpus of money to put into renewable assets. So in 2019, in the run-up to COP25, we put together a program with a 100 million euro corpus to finance renewable energy investments for suppliers. So we engage with our suppliers on business cases, and we finance various type of investments, which can be PV panels, it could be wind turbines, it could be CHPs, it could also be electrification, for example, movement towards heat pumps or electrified internal transport, for example. And then we have a steering group looking at these cases, and then we structure loans to our suppliers then to really accelerate movement towards 100% renewable energy by 2030. So as of FY23, we recommended 33 million euros out of the 100 million euros corpus to our treasury to give out these loans to our suppliers then.
And one of the suppliers that made use of this offer is Woodsland Furniture in Vietnam. Tuyet, how did that program, how did that help you accelerate your transition to renewable electricity? Hang on a second, we can't hear you. Now
Yes.
you're on. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. For us, we have invested our first solar panel in the rooftop in 2020, and that is from our finance. But in 2022, we have to got the finance support from IKEA for 3 years loan, which is about $2.2 million. And for that, we invest into a solar panel on the rooftop with a capacity about 4.4 megawatt peak. And this solar system can generate clean energy for IKEA production and help us to reduce about 4,000 tons of CO2 every year. Up to now, so we are still in the payback period because this is 3 years loan, and up to now we had total 10 megawatt peak and in covering about 80,000 square meter in the rooftop for all the factories. Yeah, and the benefit for this investment is not only reduce the carbon dioxide, but also give us the source of the clean and free energy in the future. And this is help us to consolidate our competitiveness in the market in a sustainable way that we believe.
Thank you. I'd now like to ask a question really to all of you, and that has to do with this idea that we have of the race to the top, right? The exponential race to the top. When currently accelerating the energy and materials transformation comes at a cost, what advantage do you see for your companies to be doing it anyway, and to be doing it now, and to be doing it fast? Anyone who wants to start can start.
Sure.
For us,
What's the advantage for your company? The competitive advantage. You know, do you think that it already now is an important step to take because of what you're seeing in the future, and where you're willing to take that hit, let's say, on the cost because of the essentially the bet on that it plays out in the future? Sri.
Yeah, it's very much as I was mentioning in a panel yesterday as well, it's a part of our corporate strategy as well, because we definitely see this as a source of competitive advantage, being a first mover in the space. Fredrik was also mentioning about access to materials. In the future, companies will anyways move here. The future is here to stay. It's not that in the future we will need less of these green steel, for example. The demand will only outweigh the demand will outweigh the supply as such. And then I think being early movers in this space can secure access to these critical capacities. And then it also moving towards this helps in building business resilience as well, because for us as brands, we also need to secure the durability of the brand. IKEA we have been around for 80 years, and we need to secure our existence for another 80 years, and hopefully even more. And this is a really important tool to make that happen. We need to change and transform our business, and to really see this as a competitive advantage as such.
Is that a view that you share, Fredrik and Johan, over there in Stockholm?
Yeah, I just want to echo what was said right now. I think the competitive advantage, I mean, we're building our future together here, and we're building a company to survive tomorrow. But I think it's something more soft around it, as well as we have put really driving the shift into our purpose. That's the cornerstone of our company today. And that attracts people that really want to make change and bring the best brains to the table. But I also think that it matters to show that we believe in this future. Because if we put a bet, if we put our company at stake, then hopefully also partners around us, not only upstream, but also downstream. We need customers and transport buyers and other parts of society to lean in, to be the bold, be the brave, but also really, really stubborn. And not being a company driving the shift, not being a company at the forefront, not being a race to the top competitor, that doesn't work. So I think there's something there as well. We need bold and brave leaders and companies from all sectors of society, in fact. So I think there's no choice. It's just to go. We can do it.
And here's an opportunity for a call to action. What other players, whether that's policy, whether that's finance, other companies, cities, regions, what other players could help you make the investments to accelerate your transformation even further? Anyone?
No, yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I can say so. I mean, for example, we have had the EU election, and hopefully we will still have a very ambitious climate politics in the EU to kind of lean against. We see that there needs to be a price for CO2, a polluter pays principle that will really accelerate the shift that all industries need, and especially the hard to abate industries. And just connecting back to the last question, I mean, our whole reason for being is to decarbonize these hard to abate industries, and with that, we get to be part of shaping new markets. We get to be part of shaping green premiums, and we get to be part of impacting policymakers in making these bold decisions to be able to really enforce ambitious climate policies that we need for our survival. I mean, this is really important that we drive this shift together.
And I take the opportunity to jump in there again. Obviously, that ecosystems around transports tomorrow, it needs access to renewable energy. It needs access to a grid that has capacity where it's needed. It's also a matter of making sure that there is charging capacity out there when it's needed. But last but not least, if there isn't a reasonable money logic in this, if it's still a lot cheaper to use fossil fuels instead of using renewable energy, then I'm afraid that scale won't come. The hockey stick in the transition curve won't come. So I think there's a big role to play here from the political side of society as well.
Thank you, Fredrik. Just wondering, Tuyet, Sri, do you want to come in?
Yeah, as I said before, that we are using clean energy now, but we expect to have to enjoy the clean and also free energy in the future, and this future will be about 7 to 8 years when all the investment today is returned. And I think I hope that if other manufacturers like us who can have the opportunity to approach the finance support like IKEA gave to us, it can help this transformation progress faster.
Thank you. Any final thoughts from you, Sri?
I think it's a fantastic opportunity in the form of NDCs, NDC 3.0 for governments to really help through policy to reflect.
And that's, just to chime in, the nationally determined contribution, so the national climate action plans that countries are committed to delivering again next year under the Paris Agreement.
So in that, the ambition really needs to come clear in terms of phasing out fossil fuel, not locking in money and investments in new assets, which will become stranded in some years, and to really rather incentivize through policy investments and really scale up renewables as such. And also, in a sense, relook at the risk premiums in many of the countries with very good preconditions. Because of risk premium, the internal rate of return is quite high, which prohibits new projects in many countries. So how can we sort of also, how can we sort of solve for that? But also for not to outsource everything to the governments. I think private sector also has a role to play. And for example, we have started doing a small initiative that, through a 100 million euro financing program. But similarly, we can have a lot more of players joining in, and together, all of these small droplets will make a big ocean, so as to say.
Thank you very much, Sriram Rajagopal of Inter IKEA Group, to Thi Bach Tuyet of Woodsland Furniture in Vietnam. Thank you, Fredrik Nilzén of Scania and Johan Mandaric Reunanen of H2 Green Steel. And with that, let's wrap up this session, Exponential Race to the top session. But do stay tuned for the next one, where we look even closer at some financing questions.